You've seen that before. Me too. Hi, friends. Hello. So we're starting a new series today called Direction from Above. And it's going to be two parts today. I'm going to talk about individual direction. Next week, we'll be talking about corporate direction, like us, Northgate. So this week, individual, next week, that. Direction from above. And it is very much a continuation of our last two series about community and move. So basically, in the move series, John encouraged you to what? Hear God's plan for your life, right? Get some pieces. So now once you've heard God's plan, now what is basically what we're looking at these next 2 weeks. And I'm going to just be totally honest. Today's going to be like a meat potatoes type message, and next week's going to be like Thanksgiving. So make sure you're here next week. Now, when we talk about direction, often in the Christian world, we use this phrase, calling. What's your calling? Or what are you called to? So when I use these two phrases or ideas, in my mind at least, the semantic overlap is pretty much universal. I realize that there is some differences, but basically, when you hear me use these two phrases, I'm talking about the same thing. God's plan for your life, his call for your life, direction for your life. So, to start, I'm going to pray, and we're going to move forward. And, sorry, things are happening in my brain that I'm trying to filter. So we're going to pray, and then we're going to go from there. So, Jesus, oh gosh. Thanks for being active in our community, in the world, in us. We would like more activity and to be in tune and aligned with that activity. We believe, as Christians, that you have a plan for us, a plan for our world. Help us to align ourselves with that and to be willing to go through hard things sometimes. Even though you don't send them our way, they come our way. So, Father, I just pray, as I always try to, that everything I say in this moment that is of you will go far and deep and into our innermost being, and everything that is amiss that would just fall deaf upon deaf ears. In Jesus' name, everyone said, amen. Okay, so before we look through the Christian lens of what it means to be called, I just want to real quick talk about calling. Like when you call someone, what does that mean? When you call someone and I say, hey, Sally, I call is this Sally? Yeah, hey, you want to go get some chicken wings or something? Or I, say, hey, Jonathan, you want to go skiing? Or I say, hey, Bill, you want to go shoot some darts? I don't know. So when someone calls you, it's two things. Yes, okay, we're playing darts later. Great, I'll meet you there. Now, thanks. Two things happens. Somebody or something or someone names you and invites you to do something or invites you into something, right? So when I call you and I say, hey, is this John? You want to talk? I'm naming you and inviting you into something. Or when you cut someone off in traffic and they say, hey, blankety blank, get off the road. They're naming you and inviting you to get off the road. You know what I'm saying? Or advertisements like the Old Spice ads these days, like what they're naming me a smelly non-man unless if I acquire their product and become a very good smelling, highly influential man by buying Old Spice. And I'll be able to wear my shirt and ride a horse and all that good stuff, right? So that's what advertisement's doing. It's actually naming you. It's a type of calling. So there's a lot of voices in our world calling us to something. You feel that around? And if we're honest, or if we're observing correctly, probably we already know that most of the things that are calling our name aren't leading us anywhere good, Like they're not leading us down the path of abundant life. When I talk to the kids about drugs and alcohol, sometimes I like to go down this road. You know how you wake up and you think, oh, I gotta eat. Or you wake up and say, oh, I just gotta get on Fortnite. Or you wake up and the voices start calling you to do something. And I just say, this is just what I think. You can take this as you want. Do you want another voice that when you get up says, hey, I want your attention? So that's how I sometimes talk about drugs and alcohol, because you just, when you're young, there's enough voices to get confused by. You know what I'm saying? So by the way, did you know that the average person who uses the interwebs, that we consume between 3,000 and 5,000 advertisements per day? So talk about a lot of voices calling you to do something. Even like when you get on like Bible Gateway to read John 3:16, all of a sudden there's this ad for Northeastern Seminary and this ad and this ad, and you know what I'm saying? And so for most of us, especially those of us on the younger end of things, we're completely immune to it, right? And so then the advertisements have to get louder or more aggressive or funnier so that you'll dive in, right? To consume what they're selling you. Everything in this world is calling your name. It's asking for your time, energy, your money, and your attention. Now, social media, it's interesting. Many of us just think we're all just blind consumers of social media. But the thing that they sell, social media, people make money. Sometimes Northgate pays money to get an ad out there. The thing that social media sells is you. They're selling your attention. So that when you're flipping through Instagram and all of a sudden the ad for Northgate's Christmas Eve service comes up, we paid social media for your attention. Which is why we didn't sing this song this service, but we sang it last service because we ran out of time. It's why we have to have moments in which we give God our full attention so that his voice can be the voice that breaks through all others. So John encouraged us in this last series to do just that, right? To get alone. He went on a retreat. Some of us have time and money to do that. Some of us don't. He encouraged us to get up earlier, go to bed later, do something to get God's plan for your life. And so now what? So now you're getting some calling, you're getting direction. What do you do? So through the Christian lens, many times we turn to Isaiah 6:8. We'll do that right now because it's a great verse to start with when we talk about calling from a Christian perspective. So it says, "Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, 'Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?' And I said, 'Here I am, send me.' And he said, 'Go tell this people,'" and it's a long thing that God tells them. So from a Christian perspective, there's three parts when we talk about calling. First is an invitation for an individual to follow God. That could be like the traditional getting saved thing, or like, this is the mission I have for you, something like that. Two, a moment when God waits for your response. Like Jonah, he kept on saying no and no and no, and then finally he says yes. There's this moment in time where God waits. And then three, he gives instructions for what is next. Now here's the thing. As soon as we stop talking about calling from just, hey, how are you doing there, Christopher? I'm doing great. You want to go hang out? As soon as we stop talking about that type of calling and move over to a Christian calling, this weird thing happens. And I don't know why it happened in the historical church, but somewhere along the line, calling became just for laity. Like priests. Sorry, laity. Am I using that word right? I don't think I am using that right. That's you guys. Idiot! Okay, moving on. I'm going to try that again. Somewhere along the line in historical history, I don't know why, calling became just for pastors, worship leaders, missionaries, and the like. But calling, the Christian calling, I can't get over how much of a fool I am, but it's okay, is for everyone. The Latin for vocation is this. Vocation comes from the Latin word or Latin vocare, to call, and means the work a person is called to by God. There are all different kinds of voices calling to us, calling to all kinds of different kinds of work. And the problem is to find out which is the voice of God rather than of society or the superego or self-interest. By and large, a good rule for finding out is this: the kind of work God usually calls you to is the kind of work, A, that you need to do, and B, that the world needs to have done. The place God calls you to is the place where your deep gladness or your joy and the world's deep hunger or the world's needs meet. And sometimes you get to, in this world that we live in, get paid for such a thing, and sometimes you don't. Sometimes your great mission from God is to build and create a very strong, happy, loving, influential, healthy family. And sometimes what you do for money is just the thing that enables you to do your vocation. Sometimes, because of a great, beautiful community that I get to be a part of, I get to have those things be one. Where what I'm called to and what my vocation is happens to also be the way I make money. So thank you. But calling is for everyone, not just the people who sing songs, write poetry, and can tell people about Jesus. You know what I'm saying? It's for everyone. So one of the words for the church that the Bible uses is this Greek word ecclesia, which basically means, or could be translated as, God's called out ones. So if you're following Jesus in any measure, you are the called out ones. You have a calling in your life. So let's first focus on this. Every Christian's calling, meta-narrative type stuff. Then we're going to boil it down, because you're like, yeah, I've heard all that stuff my whole life. What I'm really looking for is the particular in my life. So we're going to get there. First, we're going to start with the meta-narrative type stuff. Are you still with me, hopefully? By the way, I am so happy about what's happening out here today, because it's like you all got shuffled. It's amazing. People who normally sit right there, actually you guys are locked in. You guys locked in. But the rest of you, like new faces that are normally over there are over here and vice versa. And it's like sending my mind into new possibilities, and I'm so excited. So I like the shuffle. If you put your names on the bottom of a seat, I'm gonna tear it off and shuffle it. Okay, anyways. So meta-narrative stuff. Okay, here we go. Throw up that next slide if you could. So basically, we all know we have a shared calling. And this list could be absolutely endless. And I could preach a whole message on every single one of these topics, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to touch them briefly and move forward. So we're all called to do this, to be God's image on earth. We all know that, hopefully. And many of us know the fact that sometimes in this world, the only Jesus someone will ever encounter is you. They don't know God, they don't know about God, maybe have these inner things that are trying to pull them that direction, and then all of a sudden you show up and you're the image of God to them. You're the introduction. And the way you shape God to them will taint, good or bad, their perspective of God for the rest of their life. So I know it seems like a lot of pressure, but it's really not that much pressure. So you and I, we all are called to be God's image on earth. We're called to know God. You know, I made the joke that I sit here if I'm not up here, and a lot of the musicians, we're friends, and we've been playing music a long time together. So therefore, when somebody like Joel in Sons and Daughters did this really cool little drum part that I heard, and I looked over to see if he was going to look at me, and this time he didn't. But 99% of the time, when Joel messes up or when he does a really cool part, he knows I'm going to be looking. And I look, and we give each other the, that was nice, and then we keep going. Why? Because Joel and I know each other, and we've had this history. And in the same way, you and I are called to know God like that. We're called to know the little special, intricate things, and he knows the special, intricate, unique things about you more than anybody here ever could. That's how we're called to know God, in this intimate, unique way. We're called to bring about his kingdom. Obviously, we're supposed to do the works that Jesus has called us to. And you have your own special, unique place in doing kingdom work. We're called to bear spiritual fruit, peace, love, and the rest, kindness, gentleness, on it goes. We're called to bear fruit, to produce good works and good things. We're called to look, think, and act like Jesus. And that's pretty hard in all of itself, right? And of course, we're called to make disciples. Meta-narrative. All of us are called to that. And we all have our own unique expressions and ways of doing those things. And this list could go on, but you are with me. So, I'd like to look at a couple of particular stories in the Bible to help us along the journey of figuring out God's calling for our life, okay? And I'd like to first start off by starting where John talked about with Joshua in the Move series, because I'd like to bring up a specific thing that I think sometimes gets missed. And that's this. In the story of Joshua crossing the river Jordan, God gives them the command to get to the other side, right? And they show up, and it's flood season, the river's raging, and God gives him a plan to send the ark out before them, and they'll make it across. Now, I think one thing that many of us don't realize is that we all operate, including Christians, non-Christians, people operate on faith way more than the secular world would have us realize. For instance, you drove here today. Was there any guarantee you'd make it? You can't be certain that you're going to make it here to church. I know it's a little morbid thought. If you've ever flown in a plane, you can't be certain that it's going to land nicely. I'm planting things in your head and you're like, stop. Okay, you're right, Stan. You're right. But just stick with me for a few minutes, okay? But you live as though you will make it. Now, that is called faith. You have this belief, and faith steps in when you walk it out. Our world operates way more on faith than anybody wants to realize. You look at any system out there, like you walk into Wegmans, you're expecting strawberries to be right to your left, right? Right to your left, right? Correct? Sorry. You get what I'm saying? Like I know it's so stupid to think about strawberries as an act of faith, but you have faith that the systems around the world that bring strawberries to your local Wegmans will be there when you walk inside. Sometimes they're not, and you're like, what's wrong with the world? Anyways, where am I going? I know. So just stick with me. So when Joshua receives direction, which is what John was trying to get all of us to do, receive direction from the Lord. When he receives direction, he cannot be 100% certain that the waves and the sea and the river is going to stop once they get in there. It is an act of faith. And once, like John said, once the ark gets into the water is when it finally stops. And a lot of times, that's how our journeys are. They fully encompass hope, belief, and yet doubt and unbelief. And in the Christian church, for some reason, we've told people that you're not allowed to have any questions or doubts a lot of the times. Interesting, I'm going to explore this just a little bit more, and we're going to move on because it's essential to understanding this whole thing. When Jesus gives the disciples the Great Commission, he addresses, or the text says it like this. It says, there they all were, worshiping the Lord, this category of people. Then this subcategory gets addressed. And there were some who doubted. And then Jesus gives all those people, those that doubt isn't a thing for them, they're probably not very analytical like I am. You know, that's okay. We're all different people. And he addresses the subcategory as well. You all, worshipers, doubters, and believers, he gives them all the Great Commission to make disciples. So sometimes, well, let me word it like this. Once you start receiving a call from God, like you spent the retreat time, you seeked his word and his voice and all that, and you start hearing things, how do you know that it's really God? I'm going to be honest with you. You can't be 100% certain that it is. You can have confidence and you can have reasons to conclude that this is true, but at the end of the day, it still operates by faith, not certainty. Okay. There's a lot more there, and I've done messages in the past, if you're interested, on our website to hear more about that if you're confused. But I think it's very essential for you and us to know that faith encompasses both. It says, yes, I see the river and it's raging, and there is no guarantee, even though I think that I heard God say, move into the river and it will stop, I can't guarantee it. So faith steps in when you enter the water. Okay, so now let's talk about some types of ways in which God reveals our calling. We're going to look at some biblical characters. First, Abraham. Now, in Hebrews 11:8, it says this. By faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as an inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. Genesis 12:1 says, the Lord had said to Abraham, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. Sometimes when we talk about God giving us direction or plan or a calling, all he reveals is the very next step. You have no idea where the end journey leads, but all he reveals is the next step. Sometimes he says, leave the job. You say, how's that going to work? Sometimes he says, move to Florida. No, wait. He says, move to Buffalo. Move to Buffalo, people. Right, that's what he says. Right. Sometimes he says, leave New York City and come to UB. I don't know. Sometimes all he does is he reveals the next step. Can you be certain, or can you guarantee that you're hearing the Lord all the time? No, but you can be confident and trust, like we sang about, because of the way you have a relationship with Jesus, that this is where he's calling you. Sometimes the end journey isn't revealed to us because if we knew, we'd never make it. Sometimes it's just A to B. Forget Z, just A to B. And that's what it is for Abraham in this instance. For my life, right now, anyways, if you don't know, I'm going to tell you, Jess and I, we just had our second baby, Teddy, which is so exciting, good stuff. Yeah. And so therefore, she's going to take a little bit longer of maternity leave this time. So therefore, in a couple of weeks, salaries stop. And every time I think about it, I get a little angst. But God just keeps telling me I'm going to provide, and he's given me a step. Now, many of us aren't as, I am reluctant to use this word, but I'm going to say blessed or lucky that my father owns a painting business. So on top of the 40 hours a week I work here, sometimes more, whatever, I'm going to be working 20 hours a week with my dad to make more money. It's a next step. I don't know how long it's going to be. I don't know, she wants to go back in September. I want her to take longer. We'll see. I don't know. All I know is next step, work with your dad more. I don't know. And then is it the Lord? Well, I'll tell you this. My brothers, they both used to work for my dad. And both of their careers within the last 6 months took off. So now guess what? They're not working for my dad. And he needs help. Guess who's available? Me. And I'm twice the painter they are anyways. Nah. Funny. Okay. But you get my point. It's just the next step. I don't know where it leads. I don't know. I just know that's what I got to do right now. Maybe for you, you're like, I really don't want to be working 80 hours a week, but I know that's what I need to do right now. And maybe someday it's going to be, yeah, quit that thing. It's time to focus on your family. It's time to focus on building this new business, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's Abraham. Well, I'm going to leave the joke there. Okay, so next, Joseph. Joseph is the opposite. How many of you know Joseph's story? He gets a bunch of dreams that his family's going to be bowing down to him and stuff, right? And so it's like this. God reveals the end, but he doesn't reveal the journey there. And like my dad reminded me last service, if he did reveal the journey there, he'd never go, right? Because the whole entire time, Joseph is wondering, how is being sold into slavery going to get me to that? How is being accused of molesting the Pharaoh's wife going to get me to that? And yet, Joseph, because we can read the story and just so comfortably from our wicker chairs and say, oh, that's nice, he gets there. The dreams come true. And some of us, when God has been talking to us this last month, he's not revealed the next step. He's revealed the ending or the climax moment where Joseph gets to save his whole family and half the Egyptian people from starvation because of what God did. Sometimes God reveals the climax moment or the thing that you're headed towards, but he doesn't reveal, so it's like an A to Z type thing, but not B, C, D, etc. Sometimes that's what God does, and maybe that's you. Sometimes you wonder, God, you promised me a happy, abundant life, and I just got the word that I have blank. Or I just got the papers that said you're no longer married to blank. Or I just lost the job that I thought was the dream thing. And you say, how the heck do I end up there when I'm right here? And that's Joseph's story. And you can't guarantee that you're going to get there, but you can have confidence in a God that revealed it to you, and you can trust him in the midst of your suffering, in the midst of trials, that's where it's headed. You know, you're going to hear more about this next week, but, well, let me say this first. So, I know there's some dreams God has put in me, and for me to reveal them to people would be like Joseph revealing that all his brothers are going to serve him and bow down to him one day. It'd be stupid. It'd be foolish. You know what I'm saying? And there's dreams in there that I'm not going to talk about because I don't want everybody to think I'm a fool. You know what I'm saying? And some of them might be foolish. But let me talk about one dream that is in our history as a church to illustrate further how this works. So John, our lead pastor, 25 years ago, gets a dream or a vision to start a church called, thank you, Northgate. And it isn't until 10, 11 years later that the dream gets actualized. And so the entire time, there's this dream in John's heart to do this church, but it's not happening until one day God speaks and moves and everything breaks through and it just happens. Now, obviously, there's a lot of hard work, a lot of all those other things. I'm not just pretending like, it was just poof, there it is. But you get my point. 25 years ago, when God gave John the dream for Northgate, the area, Buffalo Church, was not ready to birth Northgate. You've heard our story probably 1,000 times, and I'm sorry if you've heard this thing 100 times. I'm going to say it one more time. We were birthed by 14 different churches of 7 different denominations. They pulled together resources, time, attention, and money to start Northgate. The area was not ready when John first got the dream, and it became ready, and here we are. So sometimes God reveals this thing that's in the way future, but he doesn't tell you how to get there. Sometimes it's like Noah. God gives you a vision or tells you the earth is going to flood, this future thing, and then he says, and here's how you build it. And so God doesn't teach him how to wield a hammer or a saw, but he says, this is what is going to happen. This is what you need to build. Go do it, son. And so sometimes when we're searching out, seeking God's call for our life, his direction, his plan, it's this future thing that also informs the now to get there. I've told this story before, so sorry if I'm repeating, but I'll tell it to you all as if you've never heard it. So one time, I was 16, and when you're young, the need for you to hear from God about direction on your life is a little bit higher sometimes because like the pressure of like college, okay, and and you get that, right? Maybe some of you went through that. Maybe you have kids that are going through it, and it's like, whoa, what am I gonna do when I grow up? And so like one time, God in my bed, he says, you're gonna be a pastor. And I was like, that's a dumb idea. But here I am, right? And so it was this future thing that also adjusted my life. Because I had to therefore start figuring out how to do that. Much like Noah. Okay, so one thing I forgot to say. Last service, I didn't say it because I didn't want to embarrass her because she was there. Well, let me do it this way. I'm sorry, I'm thinking through things, trying to think what's the best. So I showed you this clip at the start of the service where Michael Scott and Dwight Schrute are in a car, and they end up getting lost in a lake and losing their car. And so we did this series on move, and then we did this series on community. I just want to say something. Who you hang out with when you need community. We established that these last few messages, right? I don't think I need to reprove that to you. You were built for community, and you need it, which, by the way, how many of you, I know Yolanda, I made this joke last service, and she'll say amen again. How many of you struggle with that song we sing sometimes, How He Loves Us, when we sing Sloppy Wet Kiss? Anybody? Anybody struggle with Sloppy Wet? Just Yolanda? Jewel? Okay, a few others? Great, awesome. How many of you struggle we sing the song Reckless Love? Some of you are like, literally, God's love is not reckless. I can't sing this. Anybody? No, some of you, yeah, back there. Thank you for you literal folks. Now listen, I understand that, and I'm with you. The authors of those songs use those words metaphorically to elicit emotion. They don't use it literally. Let me give you my bugaboo, okay? And I love this song. I rocked out to this song this morning. All I need is you. I have to sing that metaphorically, even though the author intended it to be literal. Why? Because in Genesis, God said, it is not good for man to be alone. He brought all the animals to him, and they weren't suitable partners, and he created a partner, community, okay? Literally, all you need is God is not true. Metaphorically, in terms of priorities, yes, it is true. Now, I don't struggle singing that song because I just sing it metaphorically, even though Martin Sampson, or whatever his name is, who isn't even a Christian anymore, wrote it literally. Funny. But I bring it up for this reason. You need a community to work through what God is telling you your future might be. Whether that be a next step, a future thing, I'm going to be president in 2050, I don't know. Or the Noah thing, where like this is this thing that I think and I need to build that. You need a community to do that with. And if you don't have a small group, get in a small group. And if Dwight Schrute's in your car, kick him out, even though he was right, you know? So worship team, come on up here for a minute. I guess it's more than a minute, so it's like 5 minutes, right? Yeah, okay. So I said a lot of things. In the last service, I started off by saying, and I forgot to say it. I should have said it because he would have been with me better, I think. Sometimes I go through scriptures, verse 1 through verse 25, and we just nail it out. This was a flow of consciousness. I totally understand that. And I can see by the look on your faces that some of you are in those 3 different spots. You're like, how does this get me to the future you promised me? Some are you like, can you just reveal what's next? So I know that there's a large spread of calling and what God has revealed and what he hasn't revealed and what you're confused about. And so what I want to do is I want us all to stand. Prayer teams, if you can come on forward in this moment. If you're really stuck in one of those places and can't get free, I dare you to get prayed for and see if something doesn't catalyze to change your life. But we're going to sing this song, and wherever you're at in those phases, just use this song as a way to communicate with God. Your hurts, your joys, and everything in between. Your confusion, your confidence, your whatever it is, your questions. Use this song to talk with him about his call for your life. Maybe you got it figured out. Maybe you thought you figured out. Maybe you're totally lost. I don't know. But this is a moment for you to dig in and answer those questions. Let's sing.